It's good to see everyone out this evening. Thank you for your attention for a few minutes tonight. Kitchen drawers. I have a couple of interesting kitchen drawers at my house. I've got one that's got the old school slides, and I think it's got like some gunk back there. I don't really know, but it doesn't work that well. I kind of have to jam it in there a little bit, but thankfully it's not one that I use that often. It's kind of one of those drawers that we don't really have to get into that much. So our main kitchen drawer with the silverware, a couple years ago, I said, I'm gonna make this one really nice. I went to Home Depot, I got the nice ball bearing slides, right? And the mechanism is just so beautiful. Did an amazing job on it, except when you close the drawer, if you close it a little hard, it kind of bounces and then it starts opening back up. And you have to like just shut it so easy, and then everybody just back away and make no movements and hope that it won't open back up. Well, you know, both of these drawers, they have an alignment issue. They have a problem. You know, this happens a lot in our lives, a lot of different things. Maybe it's the picture frame on the wall that you've got lined up and you looked at it from 8 different angles, and then the next day you're walking in the hallway and you look at it and you're like, that's just not right. Something is still wrong with that picture. It is not lined up. You know, there's lots of examples of misalignment in our lives. Many of these misalignments are not that big a deal. It's not the end of the world, doesn't matter too much. You know, I've bought a bunch of used cars over the past 10 years, and I've gotten to where I know how to assess them pretty well. And you know, you check the tires, and if there's vibration going on, then there's an out of balance issue. Or if it's pulling left or right, it's an alignment. And you know, those they're not that big a deal. You can get those fixed. It's something that you want to be on the lookout for, but not a major deal. But then sometimes it does matter. Sometimes an alignment issue is a big deal. Maybe it's your back. Maybe your back's not lined up. You know, I think I've seen the chiropractors, they'll come around and see if your shoulders are of the same height, like one shoulder is off a little bit. Or maybe they set up the scales. You ever seen that where they have 2 scales? And you stand on both scales and it shows the weight distribution between the scales. I'm not sure if that's a scam. I don't really know what that is. But it's interesting when you do that, there's a lot of times there's a lot of difference there. And I know when you have back issues, that's a big deal. That is a problem that is very painful for many people. What about the construction industry? You want to have things lined up. You want to make sure that things are lined up from the beginning. This is a famous structure, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it was built many, many hundreds of years ago. And I think even when they were building it, it had already started to lean. And those of you that know construction and structural engineering, you probably know why. There was a foundation issue. There was a foundation issue causing it to lean. And over the years past that, it started leaning even more. And in the last 50 years, they worked to correct that lean, and they've got it to like 4% lean. And I guess the reason they didn't completely straighten it up is because no one would come view it anymore. But it is an issue with that structure. You know, there's been many other issues with construction and things that are not level and out of line, and they can cause a lot of damage, catastrophes, people dying. There's sometimes an alignment issue is very important. Well, what happens when our life is misaligned? When things we profess to believe don't line up with the way that we live. Well, a word that's involved in this topic of alignment that I want to talk about tonight is integrity. I want to look deeper into that topic for the next few minutes. Integrity, the definition, it comes from the Latin word integer, and I know I just lost a few of you on that. But the Latin word integer, but this is a good word. This is an easier one. This isn't fractions. So integer meaning whole or complete. The idea of wholeness and completeness, balanced, aligned. That is the root word of integrity. Integrity is aligning what we believe and say with our actions and how we actually live. That there's no gaps, no inconsistencies, no difference in what I say and what I do, no difference in private and public lives. You know, the work life, or maybe you're involved in some sort of organization outside of the home, and there is a culture that's a little bit different. Do you take on a different type of persona in that situation? Do you talk differently? Do you act differently? Do you partake in things differently than you ever would at home? Do you have a difference in your work life versus your personal life? You know, a few years ago with COVID, before that, there were certain jobs that were remote, but not that many. And then COVID came and everybody went remote that could, pretty much. And that has really changed work in a lot of ways, and it's caused some things that are a struggle. There's some compliance issues with people working remotely from time to time. The oversight of remote work. You know, I've heard some of those stories where some people had 2 jobs because of the lack of oversight and a major lack of integrity. They were able to work 2 jobs at the same time. You know, sometimes they will come around and do some assessment of a job, maybe in a manufacturing environment, or it could be really any type of environment. And there's something called the Hawthorne effect, is when you behave differently when someone's watching you. So they wanted to go around and get all this data for productivity purposes, and all of a sudden the productivity was better when they were watching people. And so they actually have a name for that we act a little different when we're being watched. It's an interesting thought. You know, CEOs of companies in the U.S., the number one reason for CEO turnover is unethical behavior. That's not what I would have thought. More CEOs, these successful leaders with broad responsibilities and many years of experience, are being removed for ethical rather than business performance reasons. It's a misalignment of integrity. A lack of integrity is a real problem in our society today. You know, one of the common definitions of integrity that we think about is from C.S. Lewis. It says, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Have you ever had that question? Sometimes people will do it in a setting for fun. They'll say, if you could have one of 2 powers, the power to fly or the power of invisibility, which one would you choose? And there's all kind of discussion around that. It's kind of a fun topic to think about. But a lot of times when you really start delving into this idea of power of invisibility, you start thinking that might not be so good. If I'm invisible, there could be some issues and some temptations that could be there. Well, you may have heard the Ring of Gyges, and I'm about 99% sure I didn't pronounce that right. But the Ring of Gyges is a part of Plato's works, the philosopher Plato. And the idea is where there was a ring, a magical ring, where the person had the ring and they could make themselves invisible. And in the story, the owner of this ring, it led to a lot of bad things. It led to murders and other bad things when this person had this power. Being accountable to no one, this man did as he pleased. A dangerous concept. Well, we sort of have a power in a sense, a little bit like that today. We can project an image on social media, for one. We can project an image that is different than our real image. We can sort of make our real self invisible to a point. I can pretend that I'm a certain way without living that life at all. Well, is there anything wrong with that? Is that dangerous? Is that a concern? Look at Matthew 6. It talks about beware of practicing righteousness to be seen. When we're involved in doing something good, do we want to go and post it immediately to social media? And here in Matthew 6 and verse 1, it says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. In Proverbs, it describes a lack of integrity and describes it as crookedness that leads to destruction. In Proverbs 10 and verse 9, it says, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out. And then also in 11 verse 3, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. This double-minded and unstable concept we see in James chapter 1. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded and unstable in all his ways. These verses speak to this crookedness, this uncertainty, this unlevelness. This is important for us to think about in our lives. Well, what about Jesus? What did he portray? Did Jesus do one thing? Did he say one thing and do another? In Matthew 22, they said, Jesus, you're a man of integrity here. In verse 16, they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. How did they know Jesus was a man of integrity? He was not swayed by who was in the audience. His teaching was the same, no matter who was listening. Whether it would cause him physical harm, he was consistent with his message. He showed high integrity throughout his life. You know, the Pharisees were the opposite. On the other hand, with the Pharisees, we see in Matthew 23, it says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Is that something that rings true in any way with us tonight? Well, what's the big deal? Why is this so important? Could this double image lead us to be comfortable with this idea? Are we comfortable with this idea of having two different images of ourselves? In Romans 2, we see an integrity issue, and the results are very serious. It says, therefore you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on one another you condemn yourself, because you, the judge, practice the very same things. We know that the judgment of God rightly falls on those who practice such things. Do you suppose, O man, you who judge those who practice such things and yet do them yourself, that you will escape the judgment of God? Paul clearly states the consequences here of living a misaligned life where integrity is lacking. Well, how does this creep into our lives? Maybe we're talking to a new convert, and we are talking to him about setting up a Bible reading program. And we're suggesting that and saying all the wonderful things about reading your Bible every day, and yet maybe we're not reading our Bible every day. Maybe we're struggling with that ourselves, but we're telling others, this is what you need to do. It's a misalignment. Would we tell somebody not to get close to that line? Maybe it's a modesty or some sort of morality situation. It's like, don't get close to that line. This is a good thing for you to stay back from that line. Maybe it's phone usage, and we're telling somebody, here's how you could handle your phone or screen time, but yet we're not following the plan that we're ready to give somebody else. We're getting right up to the line when we're telling others that this is a danger. If we had a struggling brother or sister come to us and ask us for assistance, would we give them something that we don't adhere to ourselves? Do we have an integrity problem? Can there be an integrity problem here in this place? In this very setting, could we have an integrity issue? Matthew talks about this alignment issue in Matthew 15 and verse 8. He says, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Are we doing this? Do we come here? Do we dress up in nice clothes and sing out and put on the image of appearing to be righteous, but deep down it's not real? It's not genuine? You know, back in middle school for Isaac, I remember he was on a basketball team, and the coach wanted to have the players all to look the same, to be, the same uniform all the way down to the shoes, and just to be exactly the same and be a team. And it was really going to be this unity concept. And so they wanted these Steph Curry shoes that were really expensive. And so we talked a little bit. I was the assistant coach, and so we kind of talked and said, hey, I don't think everybody, we can't all just afford these shoes. These are really expensive shoes. And so the coach was thinking, and he did some research, and he really wanted those shoes and wanted everybody to be the same. So he found some Steph Curry shoes from another country that were much less expensive. And so everybody got some Steph Currys at a price that we could all afford, and they looked great on day one. They were wonderful about a month into the season. And then things started falling off on the shoes. There was logos falling off. The sole was ripping. These shoes were just a cheap knockoff of the real shoes. Are we living our lives as a cheap knockoff of a Christian, of a follower of Christ? If we are, it's not going to hold up. The trials of this life, the things that we deal with here, is going to cause us to break down. We're not going to hold up if we are living in that way. Are we someone different in private than in public? Have you ever had an opportunity where you've been home alone? So I'm having that again now. I had it a little bit before, a month ago, and now my family's gone again. And I say my family, empty nest. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. But I'm going to be home for a little bit. Or maybe you're out on a business trip, or maybe it's a personal trip, and you're in an environment that your normal people are not around. And so you kind of have this anonymity that you have, and no one else is going to know what you do. Is that something that you struggle with? I went to Kroger yesterday, and I'm not proud of what I bought on my own. That was not something that was great for me, but there are some serious parts of this, and the hypocrisy that we can have, the duplicity in our lives, this deceitfulness, this double dealing. It's the opposite of integrity. Integrity is truthfulness, it's honesty, transparency, being trustworthy. Integrity is not just important for Christians. The concept is generally held up in society as a desired trait. When is it important to find somebody of high integrity? Maybe if they're handling your finances, you want somebody that is looking out for you, this fiduciary of high integrity that you can trust with your finances. Or maybe somebody that you're wanting to entrust with your children. You want somebody of high integrity, somebody that you know that you can depend on. What about our police and first responders? We expect them to be of high integrity, and we want that, and we need that. If we look to integrity as an important part of the fabric of society, how much more should we be known as people of integrity? In Psalm 15, the path of integrity is discussed here to a point. It says, O Lord, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell on your holy hill? He who walks blameless and does what is right and speaks truth in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue and does no evil to his brother, nor takes up reproach against his friends. Slander, making false, damaging statements about someone where, maybe in public we say, I love you, brother. And then in private, we're willing and ready to talk about somebody and to talk about things we don't even know if they're true sometimes, but we're ready to talk about it, ready to share this. Have you heard this? There's something going on. I don't know. Do you know about this? You know, James talks about the double talk, singing praises to God and then tearing down others. In James 3 and verse 10, from the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. We can't mistreat others and also say we love God. That's out of balance. It's misaligned. In 1 John 4, if anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, whoever loves God must also love his brother. People of integrity don't talk about things that they don't know and are not helpful. People of integrity don't talk good to our Father and then bad about others. Bad about elected officials or people that vote different or people that look different or people that live different. Let's strive to be people who speak well of others and look to lift up. People who will not share things unnecessarily that will taint someone's reputation. If I love God, I will love the things that God does. In John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. Or the righteousness in Psalm 45 and verse 7, you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness. Do we love righteousness? Do we love justice? For the Lord loves justice. He will not forsake his saints. They are preserved forever, but the children of the wicked shall be cut off. Do we love a cheerful giver? Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Do I love the way God loves? You know, kind of the opposite of that. Do we hate the things that God hates? In Proverbs 6, there are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among the brothers. If I love God, I will not approve the things that he hates. Are we too comfortable with the idea that we love God while we sometimes dabble in evil? What about our word? Do we keep our word even when it's not easy? He must not respect hateful people. He must honor those who honor the Lord. He must keep his promises to his neighbor even when it hurts. Our yes needs to be yes. Our no needs to be no. If I say I'm going to be there, I need to be there. I need to keep my word. When you say you're going to work, whether it's in person or remote, then I need to be working. You know, Paul talks about the bondservants in Colossians 3 and verse 22, and I think we can apply that to our lives today as employees and workers. It says, slaves, obey your masters in all things. Do not obey just when they are watching to gain their favor, but serve them honestly because you respect the Lord in all the work you're doing. Work the best you can. Work as if you were working for the Lord, not for men. Are we dependable? Are we reliable? You know, I recently turned a milestone in my truck. And I say my truck, some people would not even call it a truck, but it is a truck, and it's a Honda Ridgeline. And so I turned 300,000 miles in it, and I'm such a nerd about that. I took a picture of it, sent it to the family. I was so excited about this 300,000 mile mark. And, you know, the truck's got a dent in it. You know, thank you, Isaac. It's got a power steering issue. It's got a number of issues, but when I turn the key, it always starts. It has been one of the most reliable vehicles I've ever had. Well, are we reliable? Do people think of us as dependable and reliable? If someone shares something with us, can they depend on us to keep it private? If I share something in private, if someone comes to me as a broken person, or me to them, and I've got real issues, and I share with you, are you going to keep that in private? Are we reliable? Are we dependable? What are the people of God passionate about? In Psalm 15, it says, "Who does not put out his money at interest and does not take a bribe against the innocent, he who does these things shall never be moved." For people of God, their passions are not their possessions. God gave things to be used and people to be loved. Let's think about that. God gave things to be used and people to be loved. Passion for the people of God is for people. Jesus came for people, not for institutions or overthrowing governments. He came for people, all types of people. The people of God always have hearts and homes that are open for other people. Well, thank you for giving me a few minutes tonight. And when I think about the words that we looked at, and what are we going to do about this? Was there something that maybe hit home a little bit? Maybe there's a reset button that some of us might need to think about with this concept of integrity. We can start today in our prayers this evening. We can talk to our Father and ask for help to align our lives with God, not to live a double life that is out of balance. Have you ever seen this escalator sign? It says, "Face the direction of travel." Are we facing the direction that we are traveling? Could it be that we show to all around us that we are heaven bound, but we are really facing the wrong way? We don't need to live misaligned. We are only here for a short period of time. We need to face the direction to heaven. We're not going to be here long. We are heading home. Well, thank you for your time this evening, and I want to offer the invitation, if there's any here tonight that need to be baptized, if there's anyone here tonight that would request the prayers of the group here, please come forward as we stand and sing.